yourself like that a couple hundred times and you will find yourself in all your bloodlust-induced fantasies and hatred for the world, caused by your own narrow-mindedness, looking to tear down that which is good, where you want to be, in an attempt to justify your own soul-bending, suffering, and pointless existence. This is why Cain was so wroth with Abel. God revealed to Cain that this is why he was suffering, but more importantly, Cain himself played his part in it. Most people don't want to accept that because, as we've been saying, that would force one to admit their entire life has been a lie. It would cause one to have to be completely broken down and built back up again. And when you've driven yourself that far into the abyss, the only logical response is to take out your bloodlust-filled revenge on the world as an attempt to justify your own painful existence, because you just discovered that everything you have done has been in vain. When someone has digged themselves that far into the abyss, I use the word dig themselves intentionally here because you always play a part in your own suffering. That seems to be the case 99% of the time. But when you're so far down in that pit, admitting the truth, it's harder. It's the same thing with sin. The more you get yourself entangled in sin, the harder it is to go back to God, because being in that little personal layer of hell Cain found himself in, and especially to that depth, it would have required a lot of work on his end. It's easier to fall from heaven than it is to climb out of hell. Heavily alluding to the devil here. So the more you entangle yourself in sin, the harder it is to get back to God. Because being in that little personal layer of hell Cain found himself in, and especially to that depth, it would have required a lot of work on his end. So it works both ways. So instead of aiming upwards towards God, it would mean having to admit that you are one of the reasons why you're in hell. So at that point, it's easier to inflict your bloodlust-induced fantasies on the world instead of trying to get closer to God, to aim in the right direction. It's one of the ways of attempting to justify one's own suffering-induced rage. As we've been saying, it's easier to fall from heaven than it is to climb out of hell. That's why Cain killed Abel. It was him trying to justify his own rage and hate, and to prove the point that life really does have no meaning. So I'll go and destroy that which is good as a way of giving God the finger for my painful existence. I'll hurt God. I'll make him pay and prove to the world that there is no point to anything. That's why Cain killed Abel. That's why Cain killed Abel. That's why it was done. It's terrifying. It's terrifying. Let's talk about God's grace. Let's talk about God's grace. One last important thing, well, second last, because I believe we're coming to the end of this now. So one important thing to point out is that God still had grace on Cain. He had mercy on him despite his actions. Genesis 4:15 states that whoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. God driving Cain out of the land was an act of mercy. But why? To summarize what we have gone over, Cain was an oppressed, bloodthirsty nihilist whose entire beliefs were set on a lie, and eventually he became that lie, which is why he killed Abel. It was pretty much a screw you to God. He did it to hurt God, in an attempt to justify his own existence that consisted of the mindless suffering in which he played a part in. So God stopped everyone from getting their own, because if they had did that, then they would have been worse than Cain. And the early human civilization at the time would have just fallen to corruption. So God's grace was for everyone in that situation. One interesting thing I discovered about Cain and Abel is that this story reflects the crucifixion. Jesus was the truth. Jesus was pursuing God and encouraging others to do the same. Jesus is reflected by Abel, and the Gentiles are reflected by Cain. Those who believed in the old ways, or even better, the outdated truths. Those who pursued not the truth. They killed Jesus. They killed him to justify their own existence. Because as we said, a lie is only a lie when compared to the truth. It brings us back to what we discussing in the last episode, why Jesus was killed in the first place. Because people don't like being uprooted, right? People don't like being broken down and built back up. People don't like having their lives being proved to be lies. People like their little gardens of Eden. We did speak about that. Yeah, we did. Okay, I think this is it. We're coming to the end. I wasn't going to talk about this, actually. I really wasn't going to talk about it because I didn't know